Okay, this is Algebra 1, test number 1. I'm sorry, test number, says 3 on here. This is test number 2, but we are going through lesson 1.4. Is our study guide for our test tomorrow. Number 1 says, when simplifying an expression, you blank, perform operations inside grouping symbols first. You learned order of operations as please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. We're going to go a little further than that, and we're going to talk about it's not just parentheses. We'll call them grouping symbols. Most of y'all are familiar with the parentheses part, and almost all of y'all are familiar with brackets. But there's a thing called braces as well. Um, and when you make a fraction like x plus 2 over 3 plus 4, for example. That acts like a grouping symbol too. The x plus 2 is grouped together and the 3 plus 4 is grouped together. So again, this please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, this acronym we use to help us remember it, um, says P for parentheses, but it's all grouping symbols. So to answer the question, when simplifying an expression, you blank, do what's in grouping symbols first. You always is the correct answer for that one. A for that one. A is an apple, always. The rest of them are not multiple choice. Number 2 says write the fraction in simplest form. You know it's in simplest form because there's not a number that goes into both of them. Now, both of these are even. So even if you don't know what the best number that goes into it or something, you know 2 will always go into it since they both even. So let's try. Let's go with that one. 2 goes into 10. Or what I mean by that, 2 times what equals 10? That's what you're asking yourself. We know that that's the number 5. So 2 times 5. So when you cancel that out, you get 5. And you got to go with that same number 2 goes into the number 32. So 2 times what again equals 32. And we know that that's the number 16. So now look at that new fraction, 5 over 16, and see if there's a number that goes into both of them. Think about your factors of the number 5. Those are a whole lot easier because it's only 1 times something and 5 times something gives it to you. 2, 3, and 4 don't go into it. So all you have to do is check to see if any of those numbers go into the number 16. Now the number 1 does, but it doesn't change what that is. So this is considered in simplest form since there is no common factor in both 5 and 16. 3 says write 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 using an exponent. We know what exponents are. We know that that's it's just a little superscript number, a little small number that's raised up at the top of it. So we have 40s, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 10 to the 4th power. It's as simple as that. If you missed that one, you were probably trying to do too much. Now, number 4 talks about scientific notation. I'm sorry, not scientific notation. We hadn't quite got there yet, but write it in standard form. Oftentimes, when you see that term right there, standard form, it goes with scientific notation. That's why I made that mistake. But 3.7 to the 3rd power means 3.7. This is the reverse of what number 3 was. So it's 3.7 times itself 3 times. 3.7 times 3.7 times 3.7. So when it's in standard form, okay, we had us just a little pause right there. But when it's in standard form, like I said, the reverse of using the exponent is standard form, writing it by itself times itself 3 times. But when you go ahead and multiply it out, that's what it means by standard form. You're going to get 50.653. When you are doing your work, everybody, um, always identify your answers either by circling them or putting a box around them. That way you can easily pick them out. And when I check your work, I can see them a whole lot easier to see if you're in the right spot. Number 5 says 0.004 times 1.8. Okay, so look at this. Ignore the decimals for a second and just look at this like it's the number 18 times 4. A lot of y'all want to pull calculators out and stuff like that. You don't need to. You know what 8 times 4 is? 8 times 8. I'm sorry, 8 and 8 is 16. Another 8 is going to be 24, and another 8, you know, is going to be 32. So if you borrow, this is just old school right here. 32. So 4 times 1 plus 3 is 72. So we got the number 72. So if it was just 18 and 4, it'd be the number 72, but it's not. It's got some decimals going on in there. So if the decimal moves 1, 2, 3 times for that one, and it moves 1 time for that one, you got to put that 3 and that 1 together, and you got to move that decimal 4 times the same direction. So when you move it once, twice, 3, 4 times, our decimal is going to wind up there. We need to fill in those 2 little egg crates. So 0.00, and if you need to put a decimal up, a 0 in front of the decimal just to make yourself see it a little bit easier, 0.0072. Now, 6 and 7 are the reason everybody hates fractions. These two problems right here are the reason you are not alone. If when you looked at these two problems, you said, I'm skipping those. This is why. Because when you add and subtract fractions, the bottom number has to be the same. You have to have a common denominator for the bottom number. The easiest way to find a common denominator is to just multiply the two bottom numbers together. So for like number 6, it says 9 and 5. If you multiply those two together, you get the number 45. Now that's not always the best one to use. That's not always the smallest one. That's not always the easiest one to use, but it's consistent. And all you have to do is you just reduce the problem at the end. So if we put them as both as 45 for a second, you can't just bring the 5 and the 3 down respectively. We multiplied this 9 times the number 5 to get to 45. So you have to multiply the top number by 5 as well. 5 times 5 gives you the number 25 on top. We're going to do the same thing with the second fraction. You ask yourself, what do I multiply 5 by to get 45? And it's the number 9. So since you multiplied that one by 9, you have to multiply this one by 9 to get 27. Now these numbers are bigger, but they're a whole lot easier to use. Both of the numbers are common on the bottom. They're both 45. So you keep that common number 45, and you add straight across 25 plus 27. Well, we know 25 and 25 is 50, and then 2 more is 52. So all you have to do from here is check to see if there is a common number that goes into both of these. You know 2 doesn't work because 45 is odd, so 2 doesn't work. So let's look at our factors of the number 45. 1 and 45. 2 doesn't work. 3 doesn't work. 4 doesn't because you know 4 times 11 is 44, so you know it can't be 45. 6 doesn't go into it. 7 doesn't because 7 and 6 give you 42 when you multiply those two by each other. 8 doesn't go into it, but 9 does. So 1 and 9 are factors, but 9 doesn't go into the number 52. So right here, this will be considered our reduced fraction right here, and we'll leave it as improper, 52 over 45. Now, in this class, you may have had, I'm sorry, the number 3. I skipped right over 3, everybody. 3 goes into 52. Excuse me, this is not the final answer. Now and then I make a mistake. 3 goes into 5 one time, and there's, no, it doesn't. Okay. Didn't make a mistake. I made a mistake on a mistake. That is it, everybody, 52 over 45. Okay. Number 7 is a little bit easier. It's subtraction, but again, addition and subtraction have to have a common denominator. That's just fancy talk for bottom numbers got to be the same. So 8 and 5, 5 doesn't go into 8, but if you multiplied both of them by each other, you would get the number 40 on the bottom. So if we change them both to 40, and that might not be the easiest number to work with, but it'll work every time if you multiply 8 times 5. What do you multiply 8 by to get 40? And it's 5. So multiply the top number by the same 5. 5 times 7 is 35. Do the same thing with the second fraction. You have to multiply 5 by 8 to get 40. So multiply 1 by 8 to get 8. Now, unlike number 1 where we were adding them, this one, you're not changing this operation right here. It is still minus in the middle. The bottom number stays the same, 40. And you subtract 35 minus 8 to get the number 27. So now we have 27 over 40. Now 27, fortunately, doesn't have a whole lot of factors. We know 1 and 27 go into it, and 3 and 9 go into it, and that's it. So just check and see if any of those numbers, 1, 27, 3, or 9, go into the number 40. Okay, 1 does, but it doesn't change it. 27 is too big. 3 doesn't go into it, and neither does 9. So this is considered your simplified version when you subtract those two fractions. Okay, number 8 and 9 are multiplication and division. But regarding fractions, they are much simpler than addition and subtracting. So you don't have to create like denominators for these. That's the best part about multiplication and division. Multiplication is the easiest one. You multiply straight across. 2 times 1 to get 2. 9 times 2 to get 18. But there's a number that goes into both of them. Okay, the number that goes into both of them, we know 2 times itself is 2. and 2 times 9 is 18. 1 over 9 is your simplified version. With division of fractions, 4 over 8 divided by 5 over 3 is almost just like multiplication. But you have to take the first fraction just like it is, 4 over 8. And if you simplify that, if you've seen that as 1 over 2, it would be the same thing, 1/2. But let's keep it as 4 over 8 for right now. The change you make when you have division is you change it into multiplication, but you can't multiply by 5 over 3 because that's not what it says. It says divide by 5 over 3. In order to multiply it, you use that fancy word called reciprocal. All that means is flip it. 5 over 3 becomes 3 over 5, and now you treat it just like number 8 was. You multiply straight across. 4 times 3 gives you the number 12, and 8 times 5 gives you the number 40. You have to always reduce every fraction. The number 2 goes into both of these. There's a better number that goes into them, but let's pretend for a second that we didn't know that 4 went into them. 4 goes into 12. 4 times 3 is 2. That's the one I'm using. We'll get to 4 in a second. 2 goes into 12 6 times, and 2 goes into 40 20 times. So now just look at the fraction again, 6 over 20, and always ask yourself, is there a number that I can multiply by and get both of those numbers? If you ever have the answer yes, you're not finished on any problem. You have to continue to go. 2 goes into it again since they're both even again. 2 times 3 is 6, and 2 times 10 is 20. And there's no factor that goes into both of these. So now it's simplified 3 over 10. Okay, number 10 says write as a decimal. You can read this 2 different ways. You can read this as 1 over 8. Actually, you can read it 3 different ways, I guess. You can read it as 1 over 8. You can read it as 1/8. Or you can read it by whatever this operation is. 1 divided by 8. So that's what you wind up with, 1 divided by 8. Now, you know, if you just do old school division, it's going to look like this, 1 divided by 8. You know 8's not going to go into the number 1, so you got to put a decimal and make it the number 10. 8 goes into the number 10 one time, and when you subtract 8 from it, this is just old long division is what it becomes. You get 2 left over. You got to bring down that next 0 that's right there. 8 goes into the number 22 times. Times 8 is 16. You get the number 4. We got to bring one more 0 down to make it right. 8 goes into the number 40 5 times. So we got a number that says 125. Now we know that's not an accurate number, 125, because it's not 1,000 divided by 8. It's 1 divided by 8. So that decimal is actually right here. So 0, it's just right above it. It's stacked right above that one. 0.125 is the decimal equivalent. Number 11 is just doing the reverse of number 10. It's just doing the reverse of number 10. 0.75, you're writing a fraction in simplest form. Now, what you need to know about this one is this is the tenths. I'll put it below it. This is the tenths place. This is the 100ths place. So what you do is you take that number 75 and you go to the place that's furthest to the right. So that says 100. So 75 per 100, or 75 is what it's going to become, 75%. So it says write it as a fraction in simplest form. Numbers that go into these, the biggest number that goes into 75 is, 75 is 25. 25 times 3 is 75. And 25 times 4 is 100. So when you reduce this fraction, it's going to become 75%, or 3/4. And most of y'all know that 75% is 3/4. But just in case it's a number on a test that's not as simple as this one, that's the steps you use. Write